Welcome to Let's Talk BD podcast, powered by the BD School.
Hi everyone, welcome back to a new episode of Let's Talk BD. Today we're interviewing Vassia. She is a psychologist with over 20 years of experience, and she's actually specialized on perfectionism and avoiding burnout. So we're going to talk about these and a lot more topics, of course, with the goal of helping the business development community solve some of the common challenges that we face every day. But I would say without further ado, Vassia, welcome to Let's Talk BD. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you? Thank you so much for the invitation.
Also very good. And everyone, to give you a little bit of context, so Vassia and I are both experts. We both live in the Netherlands, and we met maybe a few years ago, 2-3 years ago, through a common connection. And yeah, ever since, we've just been talking once in a while, and of course, observing each other on LinkedIn. By the way, I do recommend you to go check her out on LinkedIn. She posts and YouTube, because she posts a lot of very practical tips, but we're going to get to that. But I would say, let's get started with, a little bit of more of what you do. So you're the founder of a company called AntiLoneliness. I would like to start with that. What does it mean, anti-loneliness? What's behind that?
I get very mixed responses to that name. There are people that they're like, oh my God, it's a fantastic name. And there are people that are like, oh, that's too negative. I get it. But one of the reasons that I chose that name is because I wanted to bring more awareness about on a topic, loneliness, which is a topic that we all experience at some point in our life. And specifically, as an expert, you know that you're going to come to a new country. Either you have friends immediately or not, still you're experiencing an existential loneliness. You have to find yourself again. You have to realize what's your position in the world. So that's the type of loneliness. But also when we are experiencing any kind of mental health struggle and you start working with a psychologist, immediately you feel heard, seen, validated, understood. And that lifts any kind of loneliness that you might be feeling. So that's the reason for this name. And I founded AntiLoneliness 10 years ago, actually. It's this year that we're going to be 10 years.
Congratulations.
Yeah. It started as a solo practice, but then it grew. There are now 13 psychologists working all over the Netherlands, but also we have people working in Spain, in Portugal, in Greece, in Belgium. And one of the things that also was created after the team growing was a part of my services. It was not only for people who were seeking therapy, but also for therapists. So now I'm also a business coach for therapists.
Oh, very good. So you do business development yourself. So that's something we're going to tap into. And yeah, being an expert myself as well, I can totally relate on the feeling of loneliness. I'm sure there are a lot of people listening that are experts themselves. And I think, especially for us in the Netherlands, like there is something I love living here because I think it's a country that really enabled me to achieve a lot of things that maybe in Italy, where I'm from, wouldn't be really possible. But there is something that I don't particularly appreciate of living in the Netherlands, which is really this feeling of disconnect that we have with people. It feels like everybody's very much focused on, their achievements. Like everybody does 2-3 sports and they have a job and then a side gig and then they have friends and family. So it becomes very difficult to actually build connections, at least in my case, Many of my friends are internationals themselves. I do have also some Dutch friends, but I find it's always a little bit difficult to, connect, right? Do you also experience something similar? And, do you have some tips maybe on, how to feel less lonely in such a place?
Yes, I do experience it. And for sure, that's an experience that I've heard from many people in the Netherlands. It is easier to create relationships with experts because they are all sharing the same need rather than with the locals, which are people that they have already established their social network. They don't need more. So we are coming from different needs. But also I think that it's part of adulthood, right? We're very busy, families, we disconnect from friends. I also hear it from my friends in Greece that they are not going out, they're not meeting, they're not participating in social gatherings as often as we used to do when we were students. So I think it's a little bit of a part of growing, growing up, growing older. We don't have the energy. We prefer to, stay at home, snuggle, Netflix, popcorn, and stuff like that. And the need for connection is coming a little bit with that hesitation that it's too much hustle. That's like another perspective of it. But generally, because as you, I have also experienced that kind of loneliness. I realized at some point that some years ago that I was working a lot. I had a lot of colleagues. I had a professional network, but my social network, my personal life's network was really lacking behind. So I made it very conscious that I need to find friends. So that's one thing that we can start with. Just make it like as a goal, as a project. I need to find friends. So then work a little bit strategically as a business development. Like what are the places that I want to find friends? Not just go to places where everybody goes, like maybe dating apps or maybe bars or maybe, doing activities you don't really resonate with. Why would I go and do sports if I'm not a sporty person? I want to find a friend that drags me to sport every weekend while actually I want to do gardening. Why would I do that to myself? So align the activities that you participate with your values. That's another thing. Make it a goal. Work every week, every day towards that goal. Be consistent, and participate in activities that align with your values. I think that's one of the main things. And work with your hope and motivation. Sometimes this is not going to work immediately, but sometimes we have to stick to that goal and be like, okay, it's going to happen since I'm working on this and I am showing up authentically. Sooner or later, it's going to happen, and somebody out there is already looking for me.
That's very good. And I can totally relate with the adulting part, and, what you were saying kind of made me think that when I was a kid, like I would always see my parents, like they were mostly at home or working, of course, but it was rare, that we had like friends over and so on. Like, and maybe when I was like a little child, this was more happening because my parents were quite young when they had me. But then over the years, this kind of like faded away. And I always thought, I'm not going to be like them. I'm going to be surrounded with friends all the time. But what you say is really true. We get so busy, and I can totally relate with having like, I feel very lucky because I think I have professionally a great network. I feel like they're really friends, for many things. Like there's some of my connections that I met through LinkedIn, for example. I feel I can really share like a lot of the challenges and so on. But then typically it all like revolves around work, right? While I think it's important to have a social network in real life, really to deal also with work stuff, but also like with all the challenges we face, in general in life. So that's thank you for the tips. I'm gonna start applying them. And of course, talking a little bit more about the challenges that business developers face, right? Which is more the topic of today's conversation, and really where I would like to offer to our listeners a bit of perspective. Now, in business development, we know it's a tough job. I mean, you're a business coach for other therapists. You have your own company, so you're definitely not new to business development. And we know that sometimes business development can feel lonely. Sometimes we're the founders ourselves doing it. Some other times we do have colleagues, but maybe they're working in other fields that are not doing business development. And there is this huge expectation on business development. It really feels like, it's the magic stick that is going to turn things around, and amazing. This new BD is going to solve the sorts of our company, right? And this, of course, comes with a cost for the person that is doing business development. Many of the people I talk to, myself included, tend to get very stressed about all these expectations. And I think it's also, tied a little bit to the fact that we want to be good, right? At the end of the day, all of us want to do good, right? But it's tough to, thrive in this very stressful environment and then get results, right? So why do you think is that? Why do we put all these expectations? And then how can we, navigate that and be successful professionals while managing this stress and anxiety that comes with the job?
Wow, that's a question that requires maybe 2 hours
Unpacking.
podcast. Yeah. All right. Let's start with the first part. Why do we expect so much on ourselves? The pressure that we put on ourselves. One of the things that comes to my mind is that for one reason or another, we have learned to attach results to our identity. I don't have a business. I am my business. I don't have successful results. I am my success or my failure. So when we are attaching that to our identity, the stakes are high. So we are investing more time. We are ruminating over our business 24/7. We are trying to do our best. We put more pressure to ourselves. And that, of course, affects the way we're thinking about our business. What happens in our brain is that we go in a survival mode. To talk a little bit about neuroscience, the amygdala, which is the center of fear, gets activated, and then we start seeing threats all the time around us. We think the worst case scenarios all the time. We go to bed and we're thinking, what if this goes wrong? What will people think about us? What if I fail? What if I wasted my time? What is the best decision? So we cannot sleep because our brain is really activated as if something really, really bad is going to happen. And another part of our brain that we call the prefrontal cortex that actually makes the good decisions is actually inhibited. Its function is inhibited. So when you want to make strategic decisions, you cannot because your brain is on survival mode. That's why the stressing over a business actually sabotages the business instead of helping it.
That's something that I can totally relate to. Since I started the BD school, for example, like I think I've been thinking about it 24/7, just like you said, and I do realize that the moments I'm more stressed, that's also typically where the company doesn't work as well as it should. So that seems really like our stress gets injected in the business, in our job, and then we don't actually perform as well. Can you explain a little bit more this mechanism, So what happens? Because I see a lot of business developers as well that come to the training, they get so stressed and then therefore they start doing a lot of random tactics, right? But they're not very consistent. And then they get demotivated and then they do less of that, so less results. And then there is this vicious circle that is created. What's the mechanism behind that?
It's the overwhelm. So, and to speak a little bit about perfectionism is holding ourselves to these unrelenting standards that we already, from the beginning of starting a business, even the idea of a business, we have already thought 100 steps ahead of it, and we want to reach that thing, that destination now or yesterday. So that means that we're overwhelming our brain with ideas, with pressure, with goals. And the thing that happen again to our brain is when we overwhelm it shuts down. That's why we procrastinate. Probably you've seen that as well, right? That's why we procrastinate. Procrastination is a coping mechanism for the brain. The brain says, this is too much for me. Let's do video games now. Let's clean the kitchen now. I cannot take it.
Yeah, totally. I'm the one that cleans the kitchen. And yeah, personally, I do it really because it's like, it kind of feels like it's easy. So I don't have to think when I'm doing it. And then at the end, I see a perfect result. Everything is shiny and so on. Except that then I sit down at my desk again and I see that all my tasks are not done. And then I get even more stressed. So that's, yeah. How do we, do you have maybe some tips or tricks, to get over the, not per se the perfectionism, we're going to get there more in detail, but really the procrastination, because I do feel I'm guilty of it.
Yeah. Who isn't? I mean, to a degree, procrastination is healthy. Your brain needs a break, and you give this brain a break. You do your dishes, or you go and play a video game for 10 minutes, or you pretend that organizing your closet is a top-notch, priority.
Yeah.
Okay, we need it at some point. And I'm going to tell you a funny story. Many years ago, I was preparing for the workshop of procrastination. I was doing a workshop specifically for procrastination, and I had all these ideas. It was all of them in my head. I knew exactly what I wanted to say in there. I've done it so many times with my clients. But all these ideas, they were just in my head. So I had to sit down and create the slides, the deck of slides there, so that I can be prepared. And I'm ready. It's morning. I have my tea next to me. I'm opening the Google, presentation, and I'm ready. And before I start, let me check my inbox. And I go to my inbox and I see an email from my energy provider. And it says, this month you consume that amount of gas and that amount of electricity. And I'm like, that's interesting. How much did I consume last year this time? Let me create a spreadsheet with all my consumption per month, per year, so that I can do the comparison. And instead of doing the procrastination presentation, I was procrastinating by doing this spreadsheet. And I'm like, what am I doing here? Why am I doing that? So the way to break this cycle is actually to pause and ask yourself, why am I doing that? What is difficult and challenging for me at this very moment in starting that project? What really happens inside me? So when I asked that question, I figured out that the reason was confusion. All these ideas in my head, they were a lot, and I didn't know how to group them. Where do they belong? How do I start with? So when I figured out that, it's confusion, the problem that actually overwhelms me, and I do the gas and electricity spreadsheet, I took a blank paper, no spreadsheet, no presentation, nothing. I took a blank paper and I put all these ideas that I had in my head on the paper, just like that, like throwing all these words on a paper. And then I started circling them and, grouping them, highlighting them, putting some order, and then I could start the presentation. So breaking that cycle, we have to understand what's behind it. For some people, it can be boredom. For some people, it can be fear of being judged. For some people, it can be fear that it's going to be not perfect or I'm going to fail in that. We have to find that so that we can overcome that emotional challenge and then get back to the task. And that's why one of the most powerful tips is forget the big picture. Just forget about it, because it's going to be overwhelming. You're going to be really confused or overwhelmed because of that big picture. And start with one tiny thing that you can do now, with only the first step that is ahead of you. Nothing more than that. What's the one thing that you can do? And mentally, just really put all the rest aside.
That's I can totally see that happening in business development, because, for example, many of the students that come to the training, and also something I saw after when we do the customer satisfaction surveys, the main thing that they mention is really the aspect of confusion, right? So not having a clear idea of how to do business development. And therefore, then they procrastinate, they don't do things, and then they don't get results, right? So big part of what we do is actually really structuring their process, right? Which seems like simple, but it actually is so effective, because then you work with more confidence, right? So that's, I totally see that happening. And in my case, I think all the times when I procrastinate, there is definitely like some confusion if I'm doing something new, and a lot of fear as well, and sometimes boredom too. So I fit all the categories, I guess. But
there is about the boredom thing. I had a sticker in front of me here on my screen that reminded me that, of course, being bored at some point, it's a very natural part of running a business. So there's a quote there that said, I love my job, but I don't always like it.
Nice one. I'm gonna also put it on my desk as a good reminder.
Means that don't have this, again, perfect expectation that you're gonna be thrilled to go behind your computer every day. Some days are gonna be tough. Can we create that tolerance to imperfection? Can we create that tolerance to discomfort sometimes? Can I be with something that is, taxing, especially in the beginning of creating a business, even though it's not thrilling or motivating or inspiring and it doesn't give you goosebumps? It's part of, your growth, and it's okay.
Yeah, definitely. Because I think it's, for me, for example, the boredom comes usually when I'm doing like very repetitive tasks, or like tasks I don't particularly like. And all our students know that I don't particularly like to do cold outreach. That's why then we focus a lot more on content. It's something I enjoy more, right? But obviously, we need to do also those tasks, right? So do you have maybe some, tips, a bit similar to the quote, right, that you have on your screen, but other, little tips and tricks, that we can use to motivate ourselves when, we feel maybe bored or maybe just procrastinating for whatever reason?
Well, that's something that I've learned from another person that I asked when I was, struggling with my task management and keeping my energy high. Because also that's a skill, how to manage your energy every day. If you know that you have a lot of energy in the morning and mental clarity in the morning, where are you going to spend that energy? Are you going to do something that requires no brain at all? You're going to do it in the morning? That's a waste, right? It's better to do that in the evening or the afternoon, where actually you don't have a lot of energy and it doesn't require a lot of energy. So we have to do that alignment. In the beginning of the day, if you feel that you have energy and mental strength, do something that is a little bit more challenging, maybe something more strategic, so that you can see the big picture. You can have, you can use that clarity so that you can see what actually is the best course of action that you need to take. So the tip that this guy gave me, and it's good that your students, they have this community and they can ask you, because sometimes we need to talk about these things with others, even though they say something very very mundane and very clear. Still, it's not very obvious, especially when we are in the middle of the storm. So I said to him, like, how do you manage all the tasks? Because I have this to-do list that I have never ends. What's the problem with this list? And how do you organize it? So he told me that because he and I were working both in Asana, in the task management software. So he said to me, you will create a column there with all the tasks. That's going to be your pool of tasks. But then you're going to create another column there that has only 3 of them. And there are going to be some rules there. You're going to choose these 3 as what you consider as important and urgent that you have to do today. Not only something that is urgent, because if you do only the urgent, then the important will stay behind, but it has to be something important. But also, these 3 tasks cannot be only difficult, hard, and taxing. You need to alternate, kind of a sandwich. Like when you have, after one hard task, you have to do an easy one. You have to do something that gives you joy, pleasure. And then you have to do a hard one. If you do hard after hard after hard, your energy will completely be drained faster. And then you will see that at the middle of the day, you're already done with that. So if we want to keep our motivation high and our energy high, we have to play around a little bit.
I like this tip. I'm gonna try, because I also suggest to our students, start with the things that you don't like, in the morning, so at least they're done, right? But that's true that for me, I do like to do also some easy things sometimes, because then it gives me momentum, and I'm like, oh, actually, I'm enjoying that. So that's okay. Let's keep going, right? So maybe I can tackle something else, right? But of course, throughout the conversation so far, and obviously you're an expert in this, right? So we talked already about perfectionism, which sounds a little bit like a buzzword, you see it thrown in there everywhere. So let's set this once and for all. What is perfectionism?
Perfectionism is a cluster of beliefs about ourselves and about others, behaviors and emotions that actually are related to how we talk to ourselves and how high expectations we have from ourselves. So talking about the mindset is the fear of, talking about the mindset, we're talking about these high expectations, we're talking about a lot of self-criticism, we're talking a lot about self-doubt, also included imposter syndrome, when we think that we're a fraud, that other people, have the skills but us. We also have the emotional challenges, a lot of guilt, a lot of fear of failure. And also we have these behaviors, as we said before, the procrastination, the attachment to results, the overworking. Workaholics are in the majority, they're perfectionists because they are attached to their work, but also they think that they've never done enough. And that's the pity, of being a perfectionist. Is the good thing, of course, is that you're growing, you're learning. Of course, who doesn't want to become a better person or a better entrepreneur? But the pity is that I've never met a perfectionist that actually feels happy for what they have achieved. That's the thing. They don't enjoy it. They don't feel happy. They don't feel proud. Because the moment that they achieve one goal, they have already set the next one. And they don't allow themselves to celebrate. And I've met people that they have done incredible things. Like we're talking about PhDs, we're talking about big companies, we're talking about being in high positions. And I say, how you feel about that? Okay, everybody could have done that. What? That's what you say? Like everybody could have done that? It's not that important? Yeah, yeah, and that's really sad, when you see that they're not happy, even though their initial goal was, I want to achieve all this so that I can be happy.
Yeah, that hits home.
Yeah.
And that is something I see also with many of the business developers that come to the training, but also they're just in our community, and that are just sharing, their challenges. Sometimes they're like, like we have all these big targets, and sure, maybe we can achieve them, and that's good. But then what's going to happen? I'm just going to get even bigger targets,
Yeah.
and then where does it end? So it doesn't end, right? But I think in BD there is also a bit the other problem, which is sometimes the targets that are given, especially in companies that don't really have much experience with business development, so maybe they just read a few books or read some blogs and say, okay, we need BD, and this is what the BD needs to do. And then they set these very high, unachievable, unrealistic targets, which I think it's equally as big of a problem as someone that's always sets new targets. How can we deal with that, with unrealistic targets and having to manage the expectations that come with it? And we cannot really do anything about it because our boss told us we have to achieve those targets.
Yeah, I mean, we need to go back to the basics. Why do we set these unrealistic expectations? What is the need behind that? Because usually it's the need to be recognized, the need to be accepted by the community. So we have to do something grander, something that will leave everybody with their mouth open. We need to go back to, what are the expectations maybe that other people have put on us. Maybe we were always expected to be beyond the standard. I remember when I was a child that I came back home and I was really happy because I got the results of a test and I got an A, and I was really happy to share it with my mom. And then my mom I'm like, oh look, I got an A. And then her question was like, oh, and how about your friend? How did she go there? And I said, well, she got an A plus. So why didn't you get an A plus as well? That was her question. So that can be, ingrained in our brain as whatever I do, I need to do more. We need to find the root. Why do I set myself these unrealistic expectations? Why do I have to be constantly under this immense pressure? Why do I consider work as pressure, hard work, no personal life, no rest? What is behind that? And also, what is my tolerance to when things are not going well? Because sometimes we are not okay with any type of discomfort, and this is where the unrealistic expectations can lead very fast to quitting, because not only you set so much pressure on yourself, but also you are not trained. You haven't trained your system to stay with failure, to stay with the discomfort, to stay with uncertainty. We're talking about business here. There's going to be a lot of uncertainty, a lot of mistakes. But we haven't trained ourselves for that. So the moment that something goes wrong, then we think, oh, that means that I'm not good enough. That means that this will never work. And then we quit. We lose our motivation. But it has nothing to do with the business or with our skills. It's just our tolerance to discomfort.
That is a very interesting point because Actually, one big problem, I think, in the business development industry is actually the fact that many business development pros tend to quit relatively quickly. I think the tenure is about 6 to 9 months in a company, which is ridiculous. It's way too short because, first of all, business development is a long-term effort. So you don't get results immediately, right? So if you already start with, I need to get results fast, I mean, I think you're already lost in the business development field. But then exactly the cycle that you mentioned is exactly what happens, because then the moment they don't get results and so on, they get demotivated, they quit, and then they go to another company where the same cycle applies, right? So how can we make business developers more resilient, more accepting of this discomfort?
Well, as you said, it's a long-term effort, or in other words, it's a journey. So people need to understand that no, you're not going to have the results in 9 months. Maybe yes, but you're not going to have these results in 9 months. Are you in for the long term? Are you in for this journey? Are you okay that, you're going to post something and then it's not going to have the visibility you like, or you're going to try a webinar and then it's not going to have as many participants, or maybe the fact that you have to tweak your products again and again and you have to do market research again and again. Are you okay with rejection? Huh? Are you okay with failure? Are you okay with that? For me, I think that's the number one. And the people, as you say, that they quit, again, it has nothing to do with skills. Maybe they are super talented, maybe they're amazing, maybe the idea is fascinating, but it's more about how we have created that safe space inside us that we can hold the failure and the rejection and the disappointment and work through that, not outside of it, but work through that. That's what we need. And again, they're lucky to have a team and a community that they can train them. So resilience is really a big part of a successful business, not skills, not results. It's more about resilience and staying in the game no matter what.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's definitely valid, of course, for entrepreneurs, right? So we do have, like, although it's a very difficult job, but we do have the freedom, right, to decide what targets we set to ourselves, what is realistic for us, and so on. But what happens when you're employed, right? And it's your manager that sets these very big targets that, maybe doesn't really listen to you. And, you're dealing with someone that basically just tells you, look, this is the target, you just have to meet it. So do something. How do we navigate that? Because it's very challenging. I've been there, and many of our students are been there. And with some people, some manager, it's easier to talk to. Maybe they are willing to listen, but most of the times this doesn't happen. They just say, okay, it's really top down. So how can we manage ourselves in these situations?
I think the most important there is to protect our mental health. When other people around us don't protect us, don't take into consideration, the all the efforts that we're putting there, it really comes down to us. We have to protect our mental health, physical health. We don't want to lose ourselves in that. So let's say in this scenario that you cannot change the mind of your manager, because of course the first thing that I would say is go back and talk to your manager and explain and ask for support, ask for more people, for collaboration, whatever that can be. But if, let's say, it's given that this is it and you cannot do anything about that, again, take it day by day. Don't focus on the big goal, even though that's of course the target, but focus on the day by day, because as we said before, the more we stress, the more we lose brain energy. And even though you want to be productive within 8 hours or 5 hours, how many hours you're working, it's not going to be possible if stress is taking the most and the best of you, of your energy, of your brain. So just take it day by day, focus on the tasks that you have at hand, take care of your mental health, take some breaks in between. If you have to work for 5 hours, working non-stop 5 hours, and working 5 hours with 3 breaks in between, where you go for a walk, you do some mindfulness, you do some, breathing, so that you can come back to yourself and you can replenish your energy, is a completely different experience. It's a completely different set of 5 hours. So take it down to every day. Make sure that you have connection around you. Make sure that you are allowing yourself also to ask for help, because perfectionists, they also have these things sometimes. They don't want to ask for help because that means vulnerability. That means I am weak. That means I failed. So make sure you also allow yourself to ask for help. Share that you're struggling. Share your experience with other people. Don't hold it all inside. The internal experience will be immense eventually, like 10 times more than the actual workload that you have. So make sure that you express and you share with other people around you.
That is a very good tip. And again, something that hits home because I have a bit this tendency. So that's, I'm trying to rebuild a little bit of a, let's say, trust in others, let's say, and really just, allow myself to be a bit more vulnerable, right? But one thing, that happens, when there is this cycle, right? Just building up on what we talked about so far. Is the fact that obviously, let's say you're with this company, your manager doesn't listen to you, or you're a founder and you're not really getting the results you want. At some point, your confidence starts to go down. What happened to me before starting BD school was exactly this. I was working for this company. I was really not going anywhere with my efforts, and I was like sending all these emails and nothing, no results. And at some point, I started thinking, yeah, okay, I'm the problem, reinforced by some not so kind colleagues that also said that, oh yeah, she's not even good at that, that was a big toll for me personally, because I was like, I've been doing this forever, and now suddenly I'm not good anymore. What is happening? And my confidence started to go down and down and down until a certain point I was like, okay, I need to do something because this is not me anymore, And this, I see it a lot in our community, is really the fact that, these hyper expectations and the lack of results and just, the long time that it takes to get results at some point really gets under our skin. And I think you mentioned a little bit the aspect of, identifying ourselves with our job, with our results. So I think this is probably part of it. But what else do you think are the elements of this lack of confidence? And then, of course, what are your tips to gain your confidence back?
So one of the things that happen when we are facing a setback, one after the other, as you said, maybe this step didn't work and this project also failed, and another colleague also confirmed that we're not doing a good job. So when you're having that evidence around you that they say that you're not doing a good job, one thing that I know for sure is that our brain, because it has this very protective mechanism, very protective function, it distorts our reality. So you might think that everybody is against me or everything I do is wrong, but actually is a distorted reality where the brain picks only the negative. Again, because it needs to protect you and it needs to, focus your attention on what's not working. But when we get out of it, we actually expand our frame of mind, and the strategy that works there is if we practice something like gratitude, something like noticing what also is working. And it's a difficult exercise because, of course, the inner critic is in our head might say, well, it doesn't matter that you are a good partner. We're talking about your business here and it's failing. So when we're trying to see what's really working, then again, the inner critic might force us to focus on what's not working. So what I say is, because again, this is a brain dysregulation, nervous system dysregulation, go back into simple exercises every day, practice gratitude, trying to open your perspective, see what's really working. And maybe we need to reframe. That's another cognitive exercise we're doing. We need to reframe. Yes, maybe this project didn't work, but I'm learning from this experience. I'm learning to do an extra step that I haven't done so far. Okay, but now I'm learning to do that as, an extra step in my process. Or I figure out what kind of colleagues I don't want to have around me. Well, thank you, universe, for that experience. Thank you. I needed to learn that. So trying to see things not necessarily in a forced toxic positive way, but more about seeing the big picture, that there's no such thing as failure. There's no such thing as only negative. There's something in there that we can learn from all this.
Yeah, that I'm definitely a huge believer in that. I like to think that I'm very growth minded with my limitations. I think I'm not 100% growth minded, but I do believe that we can always take a lesson, right? Even from the worst moments of our lives, professionally, personally. At the end of the day, is always a chance of growth, right? And speaking to that, so of course, I know from your LinkedIn bio actually that one reason that really motivated you to work in perfectionism and overwhelm was actually your personal experience. So, as we get to the end of the conversation, maybe could you share a little bit more of your experience with that? And what did you do actually to overcome overwhelm and perfectionism? Really something that worked for you specifically?
Well, as I say, I'm a recovering perfectionist, because once a perfectionist, always a perfectionist. Which is, as I always say, like, it's not a bad label, negative label. There are good things in being a perfectionist. You're gonna do great things for the world. You're gonna have an impact. You have a vision. You have a mission for the world, for the people around you. So yeah, it's good, and it also comes with a responsibility. But there's a healthy perfectionism and there's a toxic perfection. The healthy one is about striving for excellence and, the impact that I said before. But the toxic is the one that we are just stuck into. I'm never good enough. Whatever I do doesn't work. I am a failure, or not enjoying all these great things that we have accomplished. So that's the toxic part of it. And consciously, I'm still working, and I'm still catching myself when I am leaning towards the toxic side. So what I do, many practices. It's, as I said, it's a cluster of emotions and mindset and behaviors, and we need to catch it every moment in whatever way it manifests. So I do my gratitude journaling so that I remind my brain that there's more to life than just work, and they have already been things that have been working in my life. It's not only, as perfectionist says, the things that I failed or the things that I haven't done good enough. I surround myself with people that they actually give me feedback, constructive feedback, and they align with my mission, instead of chasing the people that make it difficult for me, because again, a perfectionist wants to do the difficult thing, the challenging thing. So wherever we find a challenge around us, we just go there. I train people around me when they give me feedback to give me constructive feedback. You cannot say, words that have no meaning only to hurt me. You have to say, what is it that I can do things better? We have to move from the fault finding to the problem solving. For sure, I also try to intervene with this cycle of self-criticism and pressure. And I remember vividly this example many years ago, when it's already evening and I'm behind my computer and I'm working crazy hours, and I'm like, oh my God, I have to finish this. This is very important. This is very important. But then I just promised to myself that I'm going to go for a walk. Okay, I have to do this stupid walk for my stupid mental health, whatever. So then I go for a walk in the park, and then suddenly something happens. And I realize that, wait a minute, I don't have to finish that today. Nobody's waiting for that. It's only me that I set that expectation to myself. I don't need, this is not a deliverable that I have to send tomorrow. It's me and my stupid standards sometimes that I set this pressure to myself. So I went home and I didn't go behind my computer, but I couldn't have had this realization if I hadn't interrupted this cycle, connected with my environment, go out for a walk. Walking really helps, and any type of exercise, so that I can bring a more regulated, bring my nervous system into my regulated state. So all these small things that we do every day, rest, connect, remind ourselves of the positive things, as I said, the gratitude thing. And also, as I said before, I'm going to go back to the rest. remind ourselves that we don't work and then rest. We rest so that we can work. We have to reverse that. So that's again the new mindset.
Thank you so much, Vassia. And, if someone is a bit curious to, find more ways to overcome overwhelm, perfectionism, potentially avoid burnout, do you have some resources that people could consult, maybe get in touch with you or anything like that?
Well, I have created a one-pager just to make it very easy for somebody if they want to print it or to have it on their phone. That is 7 ways that we can stop overthinking. As I said before, overthinking is a big part of perfectionism, and of course it leads to overwhelm. Overwhelm leads to stress, chronic stress, and then eventually burnout. So we want to break that cycle. So I put 7 steps, not 7 steps, 7 ways. You can pick and choose whatever works for you. Like, for example, one of them is the 5-4-3-2-1 grounding exercise, where in the midst of a chaotic day, you just focus on 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can touch, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. And even though it sounds ridiculously simple, still the brain feels like it has a shower of calmness and presence. And that's what we want, breaks of presence and calmness. So you will see more tips in there. And it's one pager, and I'm going to share the link with you if somebody wants to download it.
Perfect. And I think you mentioned, right? So it seems so simple, but if there is one thing I learned in today's session, is that sometimes the simplest thing is actually exactly what we need, right? So we tend to overcomplicate everything while the answer is just there, right? And most of the times it really comes down to just stop what you're doing, think, reflect, and then move on, right? So if I can rephrase a little bit some of the things you mentioned.
Yeah. And give yourself permission to rest. We're going from perfection to permission. Permission to rest, permission to be imperfect, permission to ask for help. We have to give permission to ourselves to do all these things. That's the first step.
Perfect. I keep saying perfect because we're talking about perfectionism, guys. So, but Vassia, thank you so much. This was a very insightful conversation. I think maybe we should do another episode where we talk more in depth about burnout and so many other interesting topics. But of course, everyone, we can't keep going for the entire day. So unfortunately, the conversation will end here. But of course, I will put all the links in the description below. So the resource that Vassia just mentioned. But I do recommend that you also start following her on LinkedIn. She posts like almost every day. She also has a YouTube channel as anticipated before. So I'm going to put also the link to that. So please go subscribe to her channel as well and watch some of her videos. And obviously, for those of you who made it this far, make sure to also like our video and subscribe to this channel so you don't miss any of these very interesting weekly conversations. Vassia, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I had a really nice time talking to you.
Likewise. And everyone, I'll see you again next week. Have a great day.
Subscribe and listen to more episodes of Let's Talk BD podcast.